My escape is to just get in a boat and disappear on the water. Good satire comes from anger. It comes from a sense of injustice, that there are wrongs in the world that need to be fixed. And what better place to get that well of venom and outrage boiling than a newsroom, because you're on the front lines. Everybody's idea of a great book is different, of course. For me, it's one that makes my jaw drop on every page. The writing is so original. I think in the old days, the nexus of weirdness ran through Southern California, and to a degree New York City. I think it's changed so that every bizarre story in the country now has a Florida connection. I don't know why, except it must be some inversion of magnetic poles or something. It's easy to get distracted by the vaudevillian aspects of the healthcare debate. When you're given a newspaper column, you're not being paid to sit on a fence and scratch your chin and say on the one hand this and on the other hand that. You're getting paid for your opinion. My books are character-driven. They're not driven by the story. I got overwhelmed by the magnitude of the celebrity culture in America. My background is as a news journalist, and newsrooms in the U.S. are shrinking. Investigation teams are being terminated or shrunk on newspapers all around the country. The one aspect that's expanded is coverage of celebrity culture. Humor can be an incredible, lacerating, and effective weapon. The Florida in my novels is not as seedy as the real Florida. It's hard to stay ahead of the curve. Every time I write a scene that I think is the sickest thing I have ever dreamed up, it is surpassed by something that happens in real life. Nobody with an IQ higher than emergency room temperature could ever believe that death panels would be appointed to nudge the elderly toward euthanasia. Yet for idle entertainment, it's hard to beat Sarah Palin's ignorant nattering on the subject. The one word that no politician will ever speak is enough. Enough. Here's my rule. You always want to pay cash for your own books, because if they look at the name on the credit card and then they look at the name on the book jacket, then there's this look of such profound sympathy for you that you had to resort to this. It really is withering. From my experience, politicians are much more uncomfortable being made fun of than they are being preached at and screeched at, and the soapbox routine. They're much more uneasy knowing they're a target of ridicule. Unfortunately, I don't get to read nearly as much as I want, because I'm always working on my own stuff, either the novels or newspaper columns. Disney's something to be a little alarmed about. It's not just a little theme park anymore. It's now an ethic and outlook and strategy that goes way beyond Central Florida. You can do the best research and be making the strongest intellectual argument, but if readers don't get past the third paragraph, you've wasted your energy and valuable ink. We've always been fascinated with movie stars and singers, but the fascination with people who really have nothing to offer is something new. The first rule of hurricane coverage is that every broadcast must begin with palm trees bending in the wind. I won't be making any friends in the corporate suites. I don't have an e-reader. One reason is that I like to dog-ear the page when I find a particularly good sentence or passage. Lots of people can write a good first page, but to sustain it, that's my litmus test. If I flip to the middle of the book and there's a piece of dialogue that's just outstanding, or a description, then I'll flip back to the first page and start it. All novels are about crime. You'd be hard-pressed to find any novel that does not have an element of crime. I don't see myself as a crime novelist, but there are crimes in my books. That's the nature of storytelling, if you want to reflect the real world. Humor can be an incredible lacerating and effective weapon. And that is the way I use it. They have a crystalline sense of right and wrong. It disappears when they walk out the door with their MBA. If you write satire, the guilty pleasure these days is that there's just so much material about. On the other hand, if you have a family, it can be depressing. One problem with age is that patience begins to ebb. My humor has always come from anger, but I have to make sure I don't just get angry and jump on a soapbox. I'd love to see a good script of one of my books. In these years of animations and comic book sequels, and had so many written over the years, but none quite clicked. When I'm working on a novel of my own, I try to read mostly nonfiction, although sometimes I break down and peek at something else. My driving record is not exemplary, but I have never had a speeding ticket over 100 miles per hour. I can say that unequivocally. I never laugh or smile when I am writing. When I come home for lunch after writing all morning, my wife says I look like I just came home from a funeral. This is not bragging. This is an illness. There is no writer's block in a newsroom. There's only unemployment block. The greatest sin for a writer is to be boring. Obviously, you have to make a profit to put out a newspaper. I'm not an idiot. But when the margins are in excess of 25%, you're talking about greed. When you put on the suits, when you pretend you're honest and you're robbing at a far higher level, these guys deserve to be in my novels, and I have special fates reserved for them. The one thing a lifetime in the newspaper business teaches you is pace. You spend all your time trying to make sure that the reader's going to finish what you're writing. I've never progressed very far from my days as a smart aleck in middle school. I've always enjoyed making people laugh. But in order for me to be funny, I have to get ticked off about something. Kids feel so strongly about what's going on today and what's happening to the world, and that's very inspiring. I feel more hopeful than ever before about the future. People say sometimes, "Gosh, that was brave of you to write such and such last week." Brave? What do they mean brave? It's right. How could you not write it? There's so much hate that we direct externally that we forget we have our own psychos. But that's the role of the satirist. You have to examine your own country and say, look. As frightening as this may sound, what you see in the books is the way I see the world. And so far, I haven't seen anything, either in Florida or elsewhere, to dissuade me from it. My books are shelved in different places, depending on the bookstore. Sometimes they can be found in the mystery section, sometimes in the humor department, and occasionally even in the literature aisle, which is somewhat astounding. I'd always wanted to write books ever since I was a kid. To me, the newspaper business was a way to learn about life and how things worked in the real world and how people spoke. You learn all the skills, you learn to listen, you learn to take notes. Everything you use later as a novelist was valuable training in the newspaper world. But I always wanted to write novels. I think it's always good for the author to stay a good cattle prod's distance from the actual movie making. When I'm deciding to read a book, I never open to the first chapter, because that's been revised and worked over 88 times. I'll just turn to the middle of the book, to the middle of a chapter, and just read a random page, and I'll know right away whether this is the real deal or not. Sure, I'll have characters drop in and out of books, but the main cast of characters always changes. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think if I had the same Joe detective guy or gal, I wouldn't write them as well. I wouldn't do as good a job. Informed opponents of Obama's healthcare initiative have expressed dismay at the low level of discourse.